Hello, and thank you for joining us again today. This is your host, Brother T. Glad to be back with you. And I am one of the co-founders of True Thought Spiritual Community. And so we're very blessed and appreciative that you're taking time out of your day today to join us here for our inspirational message. The message title today is The Keys to the Kingdom. Last week, my wife talked about, Reverend Renee, talked about the keys, that forgiveness is the key to happiness, or the key to happiness. And we want to kind of begin to unpack, this whole process, if you will, of what we talk about, the evolving consciousness. So I just want to talk about today the keys to the kingdom, and it's actually pretty simple. And we like to make things as complicated as possible, right? So when we talk about how simple it is, I want to reference, playing golf. If you've ever played golf, it's pretty simple. You have this stick and you hit this little pill and you put it in the cup. And so it's really simple, but the process of getting to that point where you can do that consistently, where you can actually be a master of that and that skill set, if you will, takes years and years of practice, right? So ascension, or awakening the mind to a new dimension of an understanding of who and what we are in God, it's also can take years and years of practice. And I believe that's probably the easy way to do it, all things considered, because sometimes people have extreme experiences and it causes their mind to collapse or have a psychological break to the point that their mind opens up and then they have a revelation. But that's, to me, that's the hard way of doing it. And I think if we wade in, so to speak, rather than being dropped off in the middle of the ocean and to learn how to swim, it's nice to just kind of wade into the shallow end of the pool and get some guidance along the way. And so that's what our intention here is at True Thought Spiritual Community. So with that being said, let's talk about the keys to the kingdom today. And before we begin, I'm going to ask you to just join with me for just a moment of silence as we ask Spirit to also join us. And we call forth into this space and into this conversation some guidance and some support from love. So let's take a good deep breath. And so it is with deep gratitude that we say, thank you, Spirit. Thank you, love. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Mother, Father, God. Thank you, universal consciousness. And we call forth the highest vibrational energy to support us in our conversation today so that we can meet each other in that place of high frequency, high vibration, and a high level of understanding of conversation so that we can continue this evolving personal self into a new dimensional experience of love. And so it is. And so we begin. The keys to the kingdom. Well, first let's talk about the kingdom. Okay, what is a kingdom to you? When we hear that term, when I hear that term, we think about a king, right? That has domain over an area or over a country or whatever that might be. And then we also talk about the kingdom of heaven. And so in the kingdom of heaven, we kind of think, or at least I'll speak for myself, kind of think of, that there's this God, this creator, and that domain is heaven, And then heaven seems to be this universe, if you will, or this dimension, we could say, where this God, this energy presides. And there's also the implication of control of this domain, if you will. But let's back up a little bit. If we are the offspring of God, the God that we talk about here and respect is really the energy of love, if you will, the creator of all that is, the creator of the universe that we reside in, and that we are the offspring of that creator, then we are created in likeness, in sameness. And so we are same in our differences and we are same in our likeness. We are also the same in our abilities, if you will, as the offspring. Like our children have the same abilities that we do as humans, as a metaphor or as a symbol of that extension of what God is. And so we are that. So when we talk about the keys to the kingdom or what the kingdom is, I often think of it in terms of the kingdom of heaven. And I also think about it in terms of heaven on earth. So heaven then would be, if you will, this domain where we are at home, where we reside, where we know that we are there, that is our home and that is where we reside. So a lot of times, you might have heard the expression, I'll say, that, I want to go to heaven. And I've heard people say, and I think I've caught myself saying it a couple of times, yeah, I want to go to heaven. I just don't want to go there today, right? So the implication of that is that heaven is someplace other than where we are right now. And then I would have to give up control, give up my personal experience at this moment, at this point in my life as a human being, a body, mind, physical form. And so that would be a dimensional shift, and I would be going somewhere that I'm not now. But actually, and some of our teachings come through from Jesus, and I just want to share, if you're new to our channel, and if this is the first time you've, visited one of our inspirational talks, we want to be gentle and careful in how we communicate because we don't want to scare anybody off, so to speak. But it is kind of radical in the sense that what we're sharing is communication primarily. What I focus on is primarily my primary teacher has been Jesus. And Jesus represented the first of us, if you will, humans in body form, that transcended form, or if you will, became the expression of his higher self, his true self, and it's been called and identified as Christ. So we talk about Christ consciousness. But just as being the first in anything always implies that there will be a second and a third and a fourth, we are that second and third and fourth. And Jesus really said, here's what I've discovered. And his message was, and so I can't do it for you. Even the least among you will do more than I. This is how you can continue to succeed in what I have discovered and what I've accomplished. And so he's been able to, or has made an impact significantly in my life over the last couple of decades and more, because he began to channel through mediums, if you want to call them that, but it's just people, just us, those of us that have evolved to a certain point or have had an opening in consciousness, not unlike what we would call a seer or somebody that's a prophet, or somebody that, if you will, is fortune tellers or whatever, that we can there's kind of a veil between us and the non-physical. And that some of us at times, and as we understand now, as we evolve consciously, raise our consciousness, we can begin to have communication with the non-physical, if you will. And so Jesus has been able to share messages with us because we've evolved consciously, very much so, over the last couple thousand years. We definitely have evolved consciously. And so there are those in our recent past, and some still now, that are open in their consciousness enough that Jesus is communicating through them. And so that's been my primary focus over these last couple of decades. And it began for me to bring me back to Jesus was this teaching that you hear us refer to all the time called A Course in Miracles. And A Course in Miracles was a channeled work. But in that teaching, which is just Jesus channeling through Helen Schachtman at that time, back in the 60s, he said, that you and I are equal to each other, and that we are equal with him, right? And that if our mind, as our mind begins to open up, we begin to speak a new language, and that's the terminology that we're used here at True Thought. It's really like learning a new language. So if I'm going to go to a new place, heaven or another country, would I always expect that they would speak my language? Probably not. I may have to learn a new language. And so that's kind of the metaphor that we use here, or the analogy that we use to say, evolving consciously and beginning to accept this shift of being and having a new experience, let's call it heaven on earth, that we actually can begin to experience it as we shift our language. We learning a new language. And so that's the point there. But Jesus has been very clear in his teachings over these last few decades, and he's been teaching almost continuously through several people over these last few decades, that there is a different way of seeing the world, and primarily it's a thought system, and that we have basically denied or ignored in favor of a thought system that we created as egos, personality selves, if you will. And the thought system that we created has dominated our mind. And it's a thought system that we talk about as separation. And unfortunately, that thought system is not true. It's made up of illusion. It's made up of a construct that we've developed, that is built on fear and guilt also. So when Jesus began to communicate now, and what he did communicate with his disciples when he was here with us 2,000 years ago, is that there's two thought systems. And the other thought system is the thought system of love. And so we've talked about that quite a bit. So to return to the experience of peace and peace of mind and love and abundance and joy and bliss in our experience as God has created us to be, we have to return to seeing through the eyes of that self that God created. We are as God created us, but we can have a dream and play a game of separation and join together and have a different experience. So the keys to the kingdom really is about returning and using some tools and some practices that are available to us at our disposal once we know that they're available, that can take us then to a new experience, that we can literally begin to create a new experience. You see, because we are the offspring of the Creator, we are creating. Now, in the world of form, we're the maker and the doer, right? The human self, and we're always working to make the body sustainable. But in evolving ourselves consciously, what we're looking to do is to begin to sustain ourselves in Christ consciousness. In other words, to return to our true identity, our true capital I identity, capital D divinity, as personal selves. And so the keys then, when we think about keys, well, we could think of keys would have a lock. Keys are also used to hold people prisoner. Okay, we put people behind bars, and that's a pretty good metaphor for what we've done to ourselves. And so the keys that we're talking about, the keys to the kingdom, really are the keys, practices and ways of seeing and knowing and a new language of being in a certain way, so that it returns us back to our authentic self, if I can use that term today. So it's actually pretty simple. Like playing golf is pretty simple. Those keys can be pretty simple, but we need to take some time to really understand those keys, right? So the keys, and the reason we need the keys is because we really have literally locked ourselves behind the bars of our small thinking self, the mind that we created, the thought system we created. And these keys that we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks and probably for the next few months are going to be fundamental in helping us to break free of the prison. Now, there's a story, and that's been passed around a lot, but I'll just kind of make a metaphor of that story, is that some people, when they are, because of our judicial system, they're found to be guilty, and then they are incarcerated, and they're in prison. We don't want to be in prison. It's been a pretty good deterrent, actually, right? That we would go to prison if we don't do certain things. But once some people go to a prison, that's like a whole new world, a whole new dimension. When they go there, after a while, they begin to acclimate to it, and they find things there that make them feel safe, like 3 meals a day, and never having to worry about buying anything again. In other words, much of their needs, their physical needs, are taken care of. And so when the sentence has been finalized in the sense that they've paid their their dues to society and they're released, oftentimes those prisoners are really disturbed because they don't know how to adjust back to a life, and it's very frightening to return back to what was once normal for them. And that's kind of our story too. But we hold the keys. We've always held the keys because we're the ones that kind of put ourselves in this prison. And this prison that we put ourselves in is a false construct of fear and guilt. And we've imprisoned ourselves into this thinking system, this thought system based on fear and guilt. And we've kind of thrown away the keys because we use the primary tool, if you will, that the bars, what the prison is made of, is really our own thought system, the thinking self. And the primary thing that holds us there is what we practice all day long, what we do all day long, what the world is constantly doing and teaching is called judgment. So imagine then that we're going to approach the keys to the kingdom, and in that process, we can begin to be the agent of change, which is what our calling is, really our purpose and why we came here, is to be the agent of change, to return the experience for all of us, all of the brotherhood, right? All of our brothers and sisters, to an experience of heaven on earth. Is that possible? Well, of course it's possible. Anything's possible because we are the creator of our experience. So this isn't about a God outside of us doing something to us. God has given us the same abilities, the same attributes, and all of the things that we were created with, or how we kind of put ourselves and painted ourselves into this corner, or put ourselves into this little prison, so to speak, that we call this experience of separation. And so if we'll use the keys of the kingdom, then we can begin to let ourselves out of jail, so to speak, and we can begin to take a journey without distance to a place that we've never, that's never changed, a journey without distance to a goal that has never changed, I should say, to a place where we've always been. So it's a little bit like, if you'll allow me to use the analogy, and you've heard me use it before, it's like going to sleep at night. You dream of being somewhere else. And while you're asleep, you're in that little prison or in that little dimensional construct that you've created out of your imagination. And you're not conscious that you're safe at home in bed. You're not conscious of really where your physical self is, and you've created another self, and it appears to be a physical self, and you appear to be in that dream dimension, and you don't really question it very much until you begin to wake up out of it. And so the experience of letting go of the thinking self and beginning to move to the higher self as an experience, and I want to call it Christ consciousness. When you become the Christ, as Christ, in perfect safety, you can see with new eyes and see that there was really never anything to be afraid of anyway. That was a dreamlike construct. And that you've always been perfectly loved because God created you as love, and God is love, so you can't be outside of relationship with love. And you've never really left heaven because you would always be where God has created you and where God would have you be, which is an idea of love in the mind of God. So it's a journey without distance because there's really no place to go. We only need to wake up to the truth of where we are. And then once we wake up to that, then we begin to be the expression of that new self. And we could call it a new covenant that we can create with each other to create the experience of heaven on earth, because heaven is our creation along with our Creator as well. And so these are very exciting conversations that we love having because it's really all good news. So today I'm just going to, obviously, because of the time I've already taken to get to where we are in our conversation today, I'm just going to touch lightly on the keys to the kingdom. But I'm going to tell you that there are basically 4 keys that we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks and months. And the first one is the key is desire. You see, nothing really has ever been created, and we wouldn't have been created if God, our source, the source of all that is, had a desire to have us as a companions and as experience as a feedback loop. In other words, we have desire to have children as a metaphor or an analogy because we see ourselves in our children. And we see each other. We see ourselves in each other. And God sees God in us. We are God's offspring. We are God's perfect children. And so I'm just going to say that. I mean, that's about as close as I can imagine getting to what God might be, what God's desire is, if you would, in our creation. But desire, in other words, is the root of all that we experience everywhere. If you look around wherever you may be in the space that you're in today, you're not going to see anything that's there that someone didn't have a desire to create and that you didn't have a desire to share in the experience of that creation, and that's in your environment. It resonates with you. It's resonating with your energy. So desire is the number one key, because we have to become aware that when we desired a game of separation, we created an experience of separation, and that's what we're experiencing. So if we change that desire, say, I'd like to change that desire. Instead of containing or sustaining the desire to have an experience of being separate, I'm going to change my desire, and I want to be joined. I want to share in the mind of love with my Creator. I want to return to my natural state of being. I want to return to the memory of who I am, and what I am in form can then be expressed as that self. And I want to do that to serve my brothers and sisters, to serve myself and my brothers and sisters and my Creator, because like when my children are asleep, I can't play with them. They've kind of cut off the communication link, so to speak. And so if we are dreaming a dream of separation, we've kind of cut off the communication. And that's why we feel like, or it appears to be, that we're separate from God. But we're not. We're right where God would always have us be, right? So the point then is desire is very, very important, that we begin to examine our desires, because desires are what's being reflected to us in our daily experience, in our life experience. It's reflecting back what we desire. So whatever you're experiencing, you desire it. And you might say, well, this happened to me and I didn't really, why would I want that? That's not something that I would desire. Well, I'm here to tell you that on some level, because you are a multi-dimensional being, your higher self, if you will, or your soul self, if you want to call it that, has a desire for you to awaken so that you can be fully reintegrated and integrated into the knowing of who and what you are. And sometimes it requires us to have lessons and overcome obstacles to gain the benefit of wisdom that comes from those, going through those experiences. I mean, that's why we're here. And that literally is why we're here. So the first one is desire. So if I can communicate then and begin the process of communicating with my higher self and go into my center of being, my heart space, in meditation and prayer, I'm in dialogue, and I can begin to ask those questions. What is it that we truly desire? Or what are the steps that I need to take to be able to get back in touch with my true desire? What is the desire of my higher self to be expressing as Christ consciousness? So those are things that we'll be talking about. So I won't go into much more depth today, just based on the time we're going to spend here. But that's the first key, is to be aware that desire is very, very important, that we're watching our thoughts because they are reflecting our desires. The second one is intention. So intention is very important because we set the intention to reach our goal. And Jesus tells us that means and end are one. So my intention, and one way I like to look at it, is the environment in which I exist should reflect my intention. It should be in resonance with, it should be in alignment with my intention. If my intention is to awaken from an illusion, if my intention is to remember my true self and rejoin in relationship and union with the Holy Spirit, nothing more than my right mind, or my Christ consciousness, and become that expression as our brother Jesus did in form, then I need to create an environment where that intention can be recognized, and it's giving me the foundation that I need to achieve my desire. That's basically it. Now, the third key that I'll share with you today, and again, we're going to go through all of these keys and unpack them over the next few weeks and months. The third key that Jesus has shared with us is allowance. Now, we've already talked about allowance and acceptance a lot. And allowance and acceptance is really a very high call. You really have to kind of get above all the noise and chatter of the world, which is always saying, you've got to do this, you got to do that, you got to live this way, you got to do that thing. They're wrong, they're right, and all the duality that goes with all this. When we get to the place of allowance in our journey of conscious evolution, we're just kind of accepting what is. It doesn't matter. What is. So what is what God has willed, is what we're experiencing. We want to change it and massage it and for some idealistic idea that the ego might have to avoid fear or to have more safety or more security or whatever it might be. But to be to the point of conscious evolution where you really can get through the day just in peace and allow. In other words, you can still have desires and you still do things, but you're not going to be attached to the outcome. In other words, you don't get upset when the cake that you baked didn't turn out exactly the way you thought that it might. And we're going to unpack that one. That's a really important one, right? And then the fourth key that we're going to be talking about is surrender. And surrender, as the last key in our journey to the kingdom, is really where we are surrendering our perception of needs and wants completely over to the Christ consciousness, to our higher self. And that is kind of the final step, because there we've kind of let go of the thinking self completely, and its chatter and its fear and its ideas of guilt and justice and right and wrong and all those constructs. They just tend to fade to the background. And now we are joined in relationship with our higher self. And so we are beginning to be the expression of a new self. And that's kind of the new covenant that we're beginning to experience now in this accelerated time of evolution for us right now. It's happening right now, is that we then sustain that connection, that we sustain the ability to be the presence of Christ consciousness in form. And all it takes for all of this to begin and to happen is willingness. And you've already expressed willingness, or you wouldn't be listening to my message and you wouldn't have hung out here with me this long. Now, there's a couple of other things that we're going to be talking about that are aids and forgiveness that Reverend Nate talked about last week. I mean, that's a big one. That's a really big part of it. There's another one called humility, and we're going to be talking about how humility can be very, very powerful in helping us to use these keys to continue the awakening process, to continue the evolution of our personal self. And so those are the things that we're going to be doing. So I hope I haven't caused you any distress. I hope that what I'm pointing to here is really a very simple process, and it's already happening. It's not like you really have to do anything, but to begin to accept, allow, and create an environment with an intention, because you have a desire to know your true self, or you wouldn't already be in this conversation with us. And so we're beginning to learn a new language. So that's the essence of my inspirational message today. And I believe the underlying inspiration from the talk today, the keys to the kingdom, you have the ability to begin that process immediately. You already are expressing the willingness to do it, and you've already set the intention to change your life and to fulfill your function here, which is to be happy, right? Your function is to be happy. So I'm ready to get on with it. Are you? Thank you so much for being with us today. God bless you for being who you are. We love you. And if you love and appreciate and find value in what we're doing here at True Thought Spiritual Community, I'm going to ask you to help support us. It takes time and it takes effort and money and resources and all the stuff that goes into any growth of any spiritual community. And our spiritual community is indeed growing. This message is spreading and growing, but we certainly would appreciate your help. You can go to truethought.org, truethought.org. You'll find a donate button there, and you can make a contribution, or you can go to love.truethought.org and make a contribution, a donation to our ministry. It would be greatly appreciated, but it would also help us to continue the work that we're doing. So God bless you. We love you. Thank you very much for being who you are, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.